Well, how you doing, knife lovers? I'm Aaron, this is Gideon's Tactical, and I have the coveted MagnaCut blade steel in an ANV Knives A100. MagnaCut steel. Everybody and their mom wants MagnaCut right now on their blades. It's becoming more and more available. It's just like the steel everybody wants, and the styling on this A100 and just most ANV knives in general is very unique, very attention grabbing. Reminds me of like a Bugatti or a Ferrari, where you roll this up on an EDC party and your knife is going to stand out from the crowd because it's an ANV. But like many exotic cars that V12 engines with superchargers and carbon composite frames, but some of the simpler characteristics of vehicles like not leaking oil and having a handle for the door that's positioned properly sometimes are overlooked. I feel like some of that's going on here with this A100, so I'm going to highlight some of the super powerful and flashy aspects to the design, but a few things I feel might have been overlooked as well. And if you like this kind of content, I invite you to hit that like button and to consider subscribing. Make sure to hit that bell icon so that you can be notified every week when I put up new content, giving you guys in-depth reviews, tricks, and tips on gear, and helping you to better stay equipped and stay prepared for all of life's adventures. And so with that, let's hit it. So we'll start off with what makes this go, that MagnaCut blade. Now, the A100 has actually 3 variants that you can pick up. The base model is Sleipner steel, then they have L-Max, which is excellent steel as well, and then obviously this MagnaCut. And what sets this apart is that you can get this blade for, depending on where you find it and what color palette, I've seen this as low in the MagnaCut as $145. This particular color palette over on Blade HQ is about $210, so it fluctuates in there, which does make it one of the cheaper MagnaCut pocket knives in early 2023. And so I will have links over to Blade HQ as well as all the other distributors that I regularly partner with. If this blade or some of the competitive options I'm going to run in make sense for you, always appreciate it when you use those hyperlinks. Now, obviously, we're focusing in on the MagnaCut version, that MagnaCut steel, which is giving us some of the best properties of both stainless and high carbon steels. Blending those two together, this is Rockweld at 64 on the Rockwell scale, so it's going to be very hard, keep that edge for a very long period of time, be really rust resistant, but then also simultaneously not as difficult to resharpen and hone and get fine edges on as some other stainless steels that are out there. And I believe this is the 3rd knife now that I've had with MagnaCut, and it is standing up to that idea of really being this like magical super steel. It truly is that. And if you have yet to have a MagnaCut blade, regardless if it's this model or some other design, I mean, it is really an epic steel. So, I mean, in that capacity, giving you that power of edge retention, but also that capability of honing and taking care of the edge, is just superb. I mean, I absolutely love it. 3.5-inch blade, flat grind that goes up about 2/3 of the way on an 1/8 of an inch thick spine. We've got that elegant swedge, and then it flares out to a good strong tip. Now, my edge has been excellent from the factory, and then very easy to hone. Just throw on a ceramic rod every once in a while, not really even needing to, but just kind of seeing, can I keep that just like stupid sharp edge on it? And the answer is yes. Very excellent in that capacity. I do want to highlight that after watching several other videos and other people's experiences, sometimes it can be pretty thick behind the edge. Mine doesn't seem to be like that. So if you find the need to reprofile it, do know, I mean, it is still a super steel. It is going to take some time to do it, but it is doable. And in my case, I was very pleased with the overall edge performance and the grind angle that they have it at. So the power plant is humming like a kitten, and I'm very pleased with that aspect, not only in the design, the grind, as well as the edge geometry. Now, what about that fuel injector, the deployment aspect? You know, we got to get that blade out. It's got to go. And this is the first area where I have a little bit like, could have been better. So the first part is that thumb stud. It's got a little glowing orb inside there that if you leave it out in the sun, then you put it in the dark, it'll glow. It's kind of a cool little feature. It's kind of signature of ANV knives. Nothing that I'm like, but you know, it's there. Now, In some of their other models, I believe it's the A200, they do have ambidextrous thumb studs. This does not have that, as you can see right there. It has a T6 Torx screw right there that you would have to back off and then rotate if you are left-handed. It is an ambidextrous knife, but you're gonna have to do that. It just kind of offsets the symmetry of the knife a little bit when knives do this. A competitive option we'll talk about a little bit later, like the GERBER Savvy in 20CV, USA made, does the same thing. You know, it's got a thumb stud one side, but you gotta back it off. Now, I have heard that some people are stripping out these. I backed mine off, no problem, and tightened it right back down, and you know, it's holding up great. So I'm not seeing any issues with any of the Torx screws being like low quality or anything like that. I believe because of the style and the way it is, you have to reverse torque it, so be aware of that, so you don't just like crank it in there like, oh, why isn't it going? I mean, that might have been the issue that I saw. So just, you know, kind of goofy on that, but then it's very sharp edges on the recess. You know, and it would have been nice just to have like a different style altogether, to be honest with you. It's just not my favorite. Protrudes up above the blade a little bit, and it's got a sharp edge to it, so you kind of notice it. It's not unbearable, but you know, the lips are not smooth or milled and can be kind of abrupt when you're engaging that thumb stud. The pivot is running on 2 Teflon, I believe, washers. Teflon or nylon, I can't remember which off the top of my head. Double stack on either side, like 2 and 2, and then they put some like lube in there and stuff. It's fine, but I actually had to play with the pivot because it was not opening and closing as smooth as I would prefer, and like how most crossbar style lock knives do. And in so doing, to get it to function the way I want it to and be snappy, you know, like not having touched the blade and do this, I have to back off. I had to back off the center screw a little bit, and therefore the centering, though not up against the scale, is definitely ever so slightly cockeyed. So for potentially a $200 knife-ish, I wish that wasn't the case, and I'm sure part of that would be if they just went to bronze phosphorus washers. You can actually buy them off the site if you want to, off of ANV's website. These should just come with bronze washers or cage ball bearings. Either way, that would just fix that problem, and it would just be better. It just shows a level of quality that I would prefer to have. Now, as to the crossbar and the pivot, the stop bar, those are excellent. Zero complaints. Cool red that match that back spacer, and the thumb stud, and whatever color you get, I believe, is going to match that. So I mean, that's cool. Great spring action, really nice and snappy. Now on the lockup, you know, I got a very minute wobble side to side, totally rock solid up and down. So again, that could have been a little bit tighter if I didn't have to like back it off slightly because of the Teflon kind of like, kind of slowing it down. And more for funsies, 270 M4 steel, but the Benchmade bailout, you know, with those rigid handle scales and modified kind of Tanto style design, but it has that very same similar profile, you know, kind of elongated, about 3.5 inches, you know, sleek, slim, but still giving you a lot of capability. One thing again, I'm just gonna do this here, going to that action, I'm tilting them about the same angle. Here's the Benchmade, boom, just falls right into place. I remove that, nothing happens. Then I kind of jerk and it doesn't even go all the way in. It doesn't really suck itself in. So you're not going to get that same feel and vibe unless you upgrade probably to the bronze washers. Now, just like sports cars, this is ultra light. 2.5 ounces for a 3.5-inch blade is epic. That is achieved with 3D contoured FRN handles. So it's a polymer style of handle. They are 3D, you know, so they're rounded. They're not just like slabby blocks, you know, very contoured, comfortable. There's like some textured ribbing along the side there to give you some grip, so it's not just slick like a Nalgene bottle, so I like that. No liners, metal housing right around the pivot and the action, but what that means is, and what you sacrifice is rigidity. I can almost connect those two scales together when I squeeze in the dead center. So I mean, that's the give, there's flex there. So the potential for them like crack isn't really there, but I mean, there's just not that structure that I know many people look for. So it doesn't really bother me, but it is something just to be aware of depending on what your preferences in the handle arena are. We have like a floating back spacer, again, that matches whatever color palette you decide to go with. They have several different color palettes. And what that means is that in my hand, sorry, the sun is just being ridiculous and my focus point is jumping all over the place today, but fills out my hand very nicely, very contoured, large in the hand, plenty of real estate back there. I feel really in control. The guard works really well. It's a little square, kind of like, you know, futuristic look, but not aggressive. Some people are complaining about the lips being sharp. I'm not feeling that and haven't felt that, you know, when you use the blade. Lock area has some recessed jimping, so your flesh kind of grabs it, but it's not sharp or painful in any way. So zero complaints with that handle. Fills out the hand really nicely, easy to use, lots of real estate, doesn't feel too narrow, and just has a cool look to it with that red back. Then we come to the pocket clip, a wire pocket clip, which I love. I have these on several different Spydercos and other models, and I really like it. They did a great job with this. Stands off, doesn't really create an ergonomic issue for me. Going to be extremely deep ride because it's that loop over, and good tension. It doesn't feel too tight, but it doesn't feel like I'm going to bend it, you know, like a paper clip. So that's really good. Now this is an issue. I'm seeing this more and more. I actually have another knife that I'm working with right now that I had a similar problem. Companies are getting like really fancy with their mounting and hardware for their pocket clips, and it's getting on my nerves, to be honest, and this is no exception. Now we have a hidden lanyard hole inside there, right back in there on that red spacer. But in order to access it probably properly, unless you really got some excellent skills in feeding, is you're gonna have to take the scales off. So that part I was just kind of like, you gotta unscrew the scales, mess around with it to get access to it. But then I discovered you have to do the same thing with the pocket clip in order to flip it. So there's a secondary plate back here that the screw goes into, that if you unscrew that, to my knowledge, and then try to like reverse, could really start to get, it's gonna get really goofy in there, and trying to like rest and twist, it's gonna be a headache to try and swap the pocket clip. Whereas if it was just internally mounted, or they gave you one on either side, because it's not, I mean, you're gonna have to take it off, and it's this back spinning thing that you're gonna try and have to like torque. I don't know. Ultimately, I bet a lot of people, if you have to do that, are just gonna have to take the scales apart to swap and rotate the pocket clip. So that's tedious, kind of goofy, and just overcomplicated to swap a pocket clip. So just for fun, I wanna run in here, as I stated earlier, the GERBER Savvy. $200 for the aluminum version, about $250, I believe, for the carbon fiber version. Very similar, kind of really focusing on style, really nicely executed, but again, you know, like easier to move the pocket clip over, knowing that it only has one thumb stud. 20 CV steel, which is excellent. I mean, that is an excellent steel. Not quite as good as MagnaCut, but it's up there. Definitely I would put on par with like LMAX, the LMAX version of this, and it's right around that same price point. I found that like the action, because it's running on bronze bushings, and I believe it's bronze washers, and they did like this whole bronze housing aspect right here. It just seems smoother. I didn't have to mess around with the pivot than on this guy. And that goes back to that kind of like action idea there. And both the carbon fiber and aluminum are gonna have, you know, like more structure to them. So there's no flexing and some of that aspect. So where do I sit on the MagnaCut version of the A1? And I do appreciate ANV Knives sending this over to me to be able to test out, review for you guys, show you all the things I like and some of the things I'm seeing some issues with, to help you better determine for yourselves if this is the right tool for you. Now, if you can find it and get it for like that $145, depending on, you know, where it is with MagnaCut, I mean, that is a screaming deal. And if you can overlook some of those characteristics, just like you would overlook that on a Ferrari or a Bugatti, or, you know, some sort of Lotus, you know, sports car, because you're like, yeah, but there's so many other attributes that I'm just in love with. The styling is super cool. MagnaCut, amazing. And the size, and many of the features are definitely hitting good points. But that's not to say that there aren't a lot of other options out there. And even though it may not be as elegant, you know, to say that it's 20 CV, you know, there are some definite quality kind of just feel of a sturdier, kind of smoother blade on the GERBER Savvy, as an example, or that bailout. So that's not to say this isn't a capable tool, but it's going to really come down to value. And do you want to get the MagnaCut version? Maybe the LMAX version makes a little bit more sense. I think that can go as low as $135. You can still get a really good steel, a lot of these really good characteristics, and save yourself some money. So that's where I sit, that there's definitely some really cool things that make me go like, that's a sick blade. But there's some things, you know, that you're like, okay, is this really what I want to pursue after? That's for you guys to determine for yourselves, and I look forward to seeing the comments in the comment section below, especially if you own an A100. I always appreciate you owners of the tools that I test out here, giving your guys' own personal feedback and experience. And I appreciate you guys so much for taking your time to watch today. Check out the other video and subscribe if you haven't yet. And until next time, always remember, stay equipped, stay prepared, and I'll see you out there.